The Prince of Darkness is no more. The godfather of heavy metal, who had stared down mortality time and time again, had finally fallen silent.
Ozzy Osbourne is gone.
The headlines began to flood the internet. Rock legend passes peacefully surrounded by family.
The end of an era.
But for those closest to him, especially his daughter Kelly, the reality was not made of soundbites or photo montages. It was made of silence, raw pain, and the brutal weight of finality. It didn't matter how many times she had tried to prepare for this moment.
The truth was, she hadn't. She couldn't. No one could.
Kelly sat alone in her father's music room that morning, surrounded by guitars. Some of the instruments were broken, some still hummed with old notes. There was the worn leather-bound lyric book he always carried and the last pair of glasses he'd used to write in it.
She wasn't ready to speak. Not to the press. Not to fans. Not to the world.
But inside her, a dam was cracking. Across the world, fans mourned. Radio stations switched their programming to marathon plays of Black Sabbath and Ozzy's solo hits. Heavy metal had lost its most iconic voice, but Kelly had lost her dad. The man who, despite fame and chaos, loved his family more than he ever loved the spotlight.
And now, he is gone.
But what no one outside the family yet knew was that this moment, this day, had been anticipated. Ozzy's final year had not been a surprise. It had been a slow goodbye, one paved with heartbreak, silence, and secrets. Secrets Kelly would finally reveal. Before the world knew him as Ozzy, he was just John Michael Osbourne, a working-class boy from Aston, Birmingham, born on December 3, 1948. Ozzy grew up poor, dyslexic, and frequently bullied. He had little interest in school, but music spoke to him in ways the world never could. His early jobs were as gritty as his neighborhood: plumber's apprentice, construction worker, and even a short stint in jail for burglary. But then came Black Sabbath in 1968, and the world as we know it changed forever. Black Sabbath didn't just play music, they summoned it from the darkness. With Tony Iommi's thunderous riffs, Geezer Butler's poetic dread, Bill Ward's primal drums, and Ozzy's haunting vocals, they created something raw and revolutionary. Their debut album in 1970 was the sound of unease, of war, of fear. And yet, it was a comfort to millions. Ozzy's vocals were unlike anything else. He sounded like a ghost from another world, vulnerable, dangerous, sincere. Albums like Paranoid, Master of Reality, and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath would go on to define a genre.
But success brought chaos.
Drugs, alcohol, and internal tensions led to Ozzy being fired from Black Sabbath in 1979. Most assumed that would be the end of him.
It wasn't.
Instead, he rose again, reinvented. With Sharon by his side, first as manager, later his wife, he launched a solo career that would eclipse even his work with Sabbath. Songs like Crazy Train, Mr. Crowley, and No More Tears became anthems. Ozzy was now a legend in 2 lifetimes. But the man behind the icon was more fragile than most knew. He battled addiction for decades, narrowly surviving overdoses, near-fatal accidents, and countless stints in rehab.
Yet he kept going. Always.
To understand the heartbreak of Kelly's revelation, we must understand the depth of her father's shadow. Ozzy was larger than life. But he was also, very simply, her dad. When the Osbournes premiered on MTV in 2002, no one, not even the producers, could have predicted what would happen next. Ozzy, Sharon, Kelly, and Jack became the world's most unlikely reality TV royalty. For Kelly, it was both a blessing and a trap. She had grown up backstage, surrounded by music, security guards, and late-night phone calls. But now, the world watched her argue, cry, joke, and stumble her way through adolescence. Through it all, Ozzy was both present and absent, always loving, but often distracted by his own internal wars. He wasn't the typical TV dad. He swore constantly, wandered around the house in slippers, and seemed permanently bewildered. But what audiences loved, and Kelly knew intimately, was that he never stopped caring.
He adored his daughter. He worried about her.
And he showed up in the best way he could, even when he could barely show up for himself. Their relationship was turbulent at times. Kelly battled her own addictions, spent time in rehab, and struggled to find her identity outside the Osbourne name. Ozzy, often struggling too, could only offer imperfect support. But their bond endured. In music, they found common ground.
In chaos, they found each other.
There were countless small moments. Ozzy holding her hand before a concert. Kelly sitting with him during his detox days. Quiet talks in the kitchen after the cameras stopped rolling. The world saw the outbursts. They didn't see the love. By the time Ozzy's health began to decline seriously, Kelly had already shifted roles.
From daughter to confidant. From friend to caretaker.
She had become his voice when his failed him, his guide when he couldn't remember, and his protector when the cameras tried to film what should have stayed private. And still, the world didn't know the whole story.
Not yet.
Ozzy Osbourne's final year was lived in quiet defiance of death itself. Though his public appearances had become rare, each one was cherished and dissected for signs of how he was really doing. What fans didn't know, however, was that most of the time, he was confined to his home, under near-constant medical supervision. His Parkinson's had progressed. Complications from neck surgery, respiratory infections, and neurological issues made daily life painful. Yet he remained spirited, when he was conscious and lucid enough. He still called Kelly his princess, still tried to sing along when someone played No More Tears, still made jokes about meeting Lemmy at the gates when the time came. It was during this year that Kelly stopped working entirely. She moved into a guest wing at her parents' estate and spent most of her days beside her father. She helped him eat, talked him through confusion, and played him old songs when he couldn't sleep. The transformation in their relationship was stark. She was now his nurse, his confidant, and, at times, his only connection to reality. She kept much of this hidden from the public. In interviews, she remained upbeat, vague, careful. But behind closed doors, she was crumbling. The man the world knew as immortal was fading in front of her. The family had agreed, no hospice, no media leaks, no pity stories.
Ozzy would die at home, with dignity.
During the last few months, he stopped speaking clearly. But there were moments, brilliant, heartbreaking moments, when he would grab Kelly's hand and whisper fragments of songs, old memories, or simple phrases like, "Love you more." And it was during one of these final moments that he told her something. Something she wouldn't repeat until after his death.
A final truth. A father's confession.
Or maybe a request. Whatever it was, it changed her. And when she finally admitted it to the world, we all understood what we had long suspected. There was far more to Ozzy's final days than we had ever been allowed to see. The night before Ozzy died, the Osbourne estate was still. Not quiet in the usual sense. Monitors hummed, machines beeped gently, and the old grandfather clock in the hallway clicked like a metronome keeping time. But for Kelly Osbourne, it felt like silence had blanketed the entire house.
She knew.
Something in her soul told her that her father was leaving soon. She sat by his bedside in a small chair, one that had become hers over the past year. There was a book of Sabbath lyrics on the nightstand and a worn black and white photo of Ozzy in his 20s, flashing a wild grin. His once raven black hair was now thinned and gray, splayed across the pillow like tangled threads of memory. His eyes were closed, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths.
She held his hand.
That same hand that once waved to crowds of hundreds of thousands, that wrote lyrics that tore through the soul, that comforted her after nightmares when she was little. Now that hand lay still, warm but unmoving, marked by the passage of time and scars from too many falls and battles. Kelly spoke to him softly, not knowing whether he could still hear her. She told him stories, about her son, about her mother, about little things he used to laugh at. She thanked him for everything, for believing in her, for pushing through his own demons, for being a father when he didn't know how to be one. She apologized for the times she had yelled, walked away, broken down. But mostly she just stayed. And then, in the early hours, he stirred.
His lips moved. She leaned close.
"Kelly," he whispered, eyes fluttering open for a moment. "You remember what I said, you promise, yeah?" Kelly nodded, though tears streamed down her cheeks.
"I promise, Dad."
Those would be the last words they shared. On July 22, 2025, Ozzy Osbourne took his final breath. Even before Ozzy's final decline, the Osbourne family had been wading through turmoil, some of it public, but much of it private, buried beneath layers of fame, television lights, and carefully curated social media posts. The Osbournes had always seemed chaotic, but together.
Loud, but functional.
But behind the curtain, their lives were marked by grief, relapse, illness, and deep personal struggles that never made it to screen. Sharon Osbourne's battle with colorectal cancer had once shocked the world. In 2002, she revealed her diagnosis during the early seasons of the Osbournes. What the cameras didn't fully capture was the trauma it caused. Sharon had fought with brutal honesty and determination, enduring chemotherapy while still managing the careers of both Ozzy and Kelly. There were nights she'd stay up throwing up from treatment, only to then get on a call with record executives about Ozzy's tour dates. Her body was in pain, but her mind was always fixed on keeping her family moving forward. And yet, as Sharon recovered, another bombshell struck. In 2012, Jack Osbourne, the quiet anchor of the family, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at the age of 26. It was a gut punch no one saw coming. Jack had always been the steady one, the tech-savvy calm counterpoint to Kelly's fiery nature. His diagnosis, delivered just weeks after his daughter Pearl was born, felt like cruel timing. The Osbournes closed ranks again. Sharon flew between the UK and LA to support him. Ozzy, though devastated, struggled to articulate his feelings. "He just hugged me," Jack would later say.
"Didn't say much. Just hugged me really hard. That's how he shows love."
Kelly, already facing her own demons, spiraled again. Her addiction battles weren't new. She had first entered rehab in 2004, then again in 2005, 2006, and 2009. Each relapse became harder to explain away to the press. But behind closed doors, it was clear, she wasn't doing drugs to party. She was trying to cope. Coping with the pressure of growing up in the public eye. Coping with the expectations placed on a rock icon's daughter. Coping with body image issues, the constant harassment by tabloids about her weight, her fashion, her voice. And most of all, coping with the pain of watching her family fall apart, one health crisis at a time. At her lowest, she battled an eating disorder so severe she couldn't eat more than 300 calories a day. Ozzy, already fragile from his own addiction and surgeries, would try to comfort her but didn't have the language for it. "He'd just sit on the floor of my room sometimes," Kelly later said.
"Didn't say a word. Just sat there."
That's how I knew he was worried. As Ozzy's health began to fail, Kelly became both daughter and caregiver. She abandoned work commitments, paused music projects, and disappeared from public life. She kept everything inside, her fear, her grief, her exhaustion. And in that silence, the weight of all the family's secrets threatened to break her. By 2023, the changes were obvious to anyone who had followed Ozzy Osbourne's career. Once a storm of energy on stage, he had become a shadow of his former self in public. His final live performance was brief, an unannounced appearance during the 2022 Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, where he sang just one verse of Paranoid. Fans cheered, but many also cried. It was clear he was struggling even to stand. The signs were subtle at first: postponed concerts, cancelled appearances, then radio silence. Ozzy's once active Instagram account became dormant. Sharon, ever the manager, released official statements citing health reasons, but avoided detail. Kelly, however, offered clues. Her posts grew cryptic. In early 2024, she shared a black and white photo of her father holding her as a baby, captioned simply, "Time is the cruelest thief." Another post, weeks later, showed the two of them walking hand in hand down a hospital corridor. No caption at all. Fans began to speculate wildly.
Was Ozzy dying? Was he in a coma?
Had something happened the family was hiding? Sharon appeared on British television, offering vague assurances that he was fighting through a tough patch, but admitted he wasn't doing well. Jack made no public statements. And Kelly, the usually candid daughter of rock's most brutally honest family, disappeared from interviews completely. And so, the mystery thickened. When a family known for oversharing suddenly goes silent, people notice. Forums exploded with theories. Old interviews were dissected. Paparazzi staked out the Osbourne estate. But no one could get close. The truth was, Ozzy hadn't left the house in months. He could barely speak. His motor skills had deteriorated. He was being fed through a tube on occasion. The family had chosen to keep this private, partly out of dignity, but mostly to protect him from becoming a spectacle. And Kelly, more than anyone, carried that burden. Kelly Osbourne never chose the spotlight, it was inherited. And for decades, it cast more shadows than light. Yet beneath the celebrity veneer, behind the tattoos and public meltdowns, was a woman fiercely devoted to her father. Their bond had always been unusually deep. Ozzy, for all his flaws, had always shown her unconditional love. "She's my little girl," he once said during a rare lucid interview. "Don't care how old she gets." It was Ozzy who first encouraged Kelly to sing. When she doubted herself, he booked her studio time. When she considered quitting music altogether, he told her that true artists don't run from fear, they run into it. And during her many relapses and rehab stints, he never shamed her. "He'd just tell me, 'I've been there. I know the devil.' But you're stronger than I was," Kelly said. But watching him fade broke something inside her. As his Parkinson's worsened and his cognition slipped, she felt like she was losing her best friend in slow motion. She developed panic attacks. Her weight dropped again. She stopped appearing in public almost entirely. Friends later said she was barely functioning. There were nights when she'd wake up from nightmares, sure that he had died. She'd rush into his room, only to find him asleep, mouth open, chest rising slowly. Relief would flood her, but only temporarily. Because she knew the end was coming. She took up journaling. She stopped drinking. She meditated. She sat by his side for hours, reading aloud, playing Sabbath records, whispering old inside jokes. She even taught herself basic nursing so she could help care for him at home, rather than let strangers handle it.
And then, one day, she cracked.
In her journal, on a tear-stained page, she wrote, "When he goes, I go too. Not physically, but the part of me that ever felt safe will die with him." The weeks following Ozzy's death were suffocating. The public memorial at St. Mary's Cathedral in London had drawn thousands. Celebrities, fans, former bandmates. Sharon had held it together like a general. Jack remained stoic. But Kelly, she didn't speak at the funeral. In the days after, interview requests flooded in. Every network wanted the first statement from Kelly. She declined them all. Until one email broke her silence. It came from a journalist named Emma Langford, someone Kelly had trusted during her addiction recovery years. The subject line simply read, "You don't owe the world a story, but maybe you want to tell one anyway." Something about it stuck with Kelly. She agreed to a film sit-down. No press, no studio audience, no marketing blitz. Just two women in a room. Raw. The day of the taping, Kelly nearly backed out. She had slept only 2 hours. Her eyes were red, voice hoarse. But she sat down, looked into the camera, and decided to speak not as a celebrity, but as a daughter. The interview began simply. Memories. Laughter. Childhood stories. But halfway through, Emma asked, "What do you miss most about him?" Kelly hesitated. Her mouth trembled. She closed her eyes. His voice. But not the one people know. Not the screaming stage voice. I mean, the soft one. The one he only used when he called me princess. Then, as the cameras kept rolling, she said what the world didn't expect. There was something he told me, right before he passed. Something I've carried alone. I wasn't sure I'd ever say it out loud. The words were quiet. There was no dramatic music or flashy editing. But what Kelly said shook the world. She took a long breath, looked directly into the lens, and said, "He told me he was tired. That he didn't want to fight anymore. That he was scared, not of dying, but of being forgotten. And then he said, 'Promise me you won't let them turn me into a cartoon.'" She broke down crying. I asked what he meant, and he said, "They'll remember the bat, the drugs, the swearing. But they won't remember the music. The love. The truth. Promise me, Kel. Promise me you'll tell them who I really was." For a moment, the room was silent. I promised him. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm talking. The world listened, not just fans, but strangers who had never heard an Ozzy song before. And suddenly, the man so often caricatured as a madman became something else entirely, human. Vulnerable. A father. A husband. An artist. The reactions poured in. Tony Iommi tweeted, "That was Ozzy. All heart beneath the madness. Thank you, Kelly." Billie Eilish reposted the clip on Instagram with the caption, "Now I finally get it." And fans, thousands of them, began writing their own memories of what Ozzy's music had meant to them. Suddenly, the world wasn't mourning a rock star. It was remembering a man. Kelly's admission wasn't just a daughter's grief. It was a daughter fulfilling her father's dying wish. And that changed everything. As Kelly stepped into the public spotlight to humanize her father, Sharon Osbourne withdrew into private grief. For the matriarch of the most infamous rock dynasty in Britain, the death of her husband wasn't just personal, it was seismic. Sharon had been Ozzy's manager since 1979, shortly after he was fired from Black Sabbath. She had taken him from near homelessness and addiction to global superstardom. Every tour, every album, every TV deal bore her fingerprints. And through it all, the cheating scandals, the overdose scares, the lawsuits and the hospitalizations, she remained by his side. Some called it toxic. Others called it devotion. The truth, like most things in the Osbourne world, was somewhere in between. Privately, Sharon was unraveling. After the funeral, she stopped responding to calls. Her talk show appearances were cancelled. Even her closest friends admitted they hadn't heard from her in days. When she finally reappeared, at a small charity event for Parkinson's research, she looked gaunt, her usual bravado replaced with a raw, unguarded sadness. A journalist asked gently, "How are you holding up?" She didn't hesitate. "I feel like half my soul has been ripped out." That moment went viral. People saw the woman who had been called ruthless, controlling, even cold, speaking with unfiltered honesty. And it changed something. Sympathy flooded in from around the world, not just for Ozzy's death, but for Sharon's decades of invisible labor. Of managing chaos. Of raising a family while running a business, caring for an ill husband, and being torn apart by the media. Kelly later said, "She was the strongest person I knew. But after he died, It was like the air went out of her. I didn't realize how much they depended on each other until he was gone. For all the world had focused on Ozzy's persona, Sharon's grief reminded them, behind every rock god is someone who picks up the pieces when the cameras turn off. Ozzy Osbourne wasn't just a rock star. He was a symbol of rebellion, resilience, and raw, unapologetic authenticity. And when he died, the nation mourned as if they had lost a family member. In Birmingham, where it all began, tributes filled the streets. Murals sprang up overnight, one of him in his signature round glasses, another of young Ozzy gripping a microphone, eyes ablaze. The Aston subway station was temporarily renamed Osbourne Station. People left candles, guitar picks, and handwritten notes along the street where his childhood home once stood. For decades, Ozzy Osbourne had been haunted by a singular image, the bat. It had become synonymous with his name, sometimes in awe, sometimes in ridicule. But after his death, Kelly decided to set the record straight once and for all. In a sit-down conversation with the New York Times, she finally addressed the infamous 1982 moment when Ozzy bit the head off a bat on stage in Des Moines, Iowa.
He didn't plan it, she said.
He thought it was a rubber toy. Someone threw it on stage. He picked it up, thought it was fake, and it wasn't.
He felt awful afterward.
Ozzy himself had confirmed that version over the years, but many had dismissed it as damage control. Now, with Kelly speaking from the heart, the narrative finally felt true. More than just that incident, she wanted to dismantle the myth that her father was merely a spectacle. That he was a walking disaster.
That he was unhinged.
He was deeply spiritual.
He meditated. He prayed.
He cried when he saw animals in pain. He wrote songs about war, about poverty, about addiction, long before it was cool to be woke. The real Ozzy, she argued, was intelligent, sensitive, and articulate, even if years of addiction had damaged his ability to always express that clearly.
He was funny. So funny.
He could make you laugh till your stomach hurt. But people only wanted the wild stories.
The scandals.
Now, with her voice finally heard, the myths began to fall away. And in their place stood the truth, a man who had lived a brutal, beautiful, complicated life, and had loved his family more than fame. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. Share this with others who care about music, truth, and legacy. And let us know in the comments, what does Ozzy Osbourne mean to you? The legend lives on, through the stories we tell.